Hey there, this is Leslie from New Jersey Permies, the regenerative meetup group, and I am actually surprised if you're listening to this because we're supposed to have good weather finally for the next meetup that is in March. I'm recording this in March 2019. So this month's meeting is about composting. And I'm recording this beforehand as kind of a practice test and a mic test. I'm really close to the mic right now, but because it's going to be a group discussion, I am now standing about as far as the farthest person would be for a mic. So that is, for the mic if we have a discussion, which I hope we do because it was really juicy for the first meeting. Second meeting got snowed out. Thank you, Mother Nature. So I hope she's cooperating this time. Okay, so I'm going to start the presentation now, and this is just really for my own practice sake, but if it comes out well, and if you're listening to it, it came out well, I will post it live. So anyway, here is No Stink Composting and Permaculture Innovations. I wanted to do this because the community I'm in is starting to get very interested in having households compost and businesses compost on a more vigorous level. And really, we have so much to compost being suburbia that I thought it would be a good one. Also, I get very excited when there are innovations related to it. And there's a lot of permaculture individuals doing a lot of individual awesome things with that. So let's just get into it right now. So I have another presentation I practiced, and because it's practice, this slide is really just to remind people when we gather together just to say their name, their organization or business, and what interested in permaculture or environmentalism or whatever, and we'll have a brief discussion about that. I have created rules for this meetup group. They're friendly rules, and this is a slide that's going to go in front of, and it's a mission, really. And they're there for a reason, because I think it'll make it more pleasant for everyone. And one of them is to focus on the positive. And so rather than talking about all the terrible things and this is for me as well, rather than focus on all the terrible stuff that's happening in relation to the environment and everything, the real focus is the innovations and the progress we're making and the possibilities that are there, and how people are getting more and more interested in environmental topics because they see what's going on. But we're not going to focus on what's going on because you can get that anywhere. We're going to focus on what is possible in our communities, in our households, and in our world. There'll be no shaming, and this is something that I have felt. I am an environmentalist, and I don't like using non-reusable plastic, but when I go into New York, occasionally I have to buy a bottle of water. And I have felt shamed by environmentalists for that. I do reuse that bottle, so it's not really a single-use bottle for me, but that's my big confession of today. And I felt like I should say that because I also had a neighbor come up to me and she said, well, don't tell me I can't use straws anymore. And I said, no, I'm not going to say that to you, but I will say maybe by attending this, I don't know if we're ever going to talk about straws, but you'll see something in a way that you're doing something now, and then you'll see an alternative to that, and that alternative will be something that you want to take up because it is more innovative and it makes more sense and it saves you money and it's easier in the long run or something like that. So, but in the interim of that, there'll be none of that, that I've been on the receiving end, and we're all trying to do the best that we can. So there's that. And the third is no politics. And that is important because even though that's a big element to it, and it's going to be hard to fully avoid that, I just don't want people to feel that they're not welcome here, because really we're all trying to do the same things: clean water, clean air, safe places for our kids and our families and our friends, and good community where we feel connected, which will make us all feel more happy and food that we know where it's coming from, and all of that, and less expensive food. I try to boil things down to basic desires rather than this lofty need to save the planet. So when I talk about these things, I try to talk about it in a most practical way, because I know that in the midst of wanting to do good, we have our lives that have gotten very busy. And so anyway, I'm kind of going off topic, but regardless of people's politics, and I have to say, I have family members who are on the complete opposite spectrum of me, but we both like to have our healthy food that's clean, that doesn't have chemicals in it, and water that is clean. And then we both agree, we'll all agree that, what happens with the leaded water in say, I'm blanking on it, in Michigan was terrible, and is still happening, and is happening in communities everywhere. And I bring that up as an example of, we might be on different political spectrums, but that is agreeable on all ends, that was just terrible. So, except maybe the people that made money from it. But anyway, the intention overall is to create possibilities and connections in an uplifting way that builds actionable hope, to build the health in the planet's regenerative systems. And so let's get started. So what we're going to cover today about composting is how composting relates to permaculture, the basic science of it. We're not going to go too deep on that, but just what you need to know, basis, and then you can dive deeper if you want. Different composting techniques, not all of them because there's so many, stacking functions and innovations, which is what I mentioned earlier, 3 steps to composting, and the easiest peasiest way, and that I think, where you don't have to think about it too much and there's not a lot of legwork, and then troubleshooting. So let's get started. Oh, and this I just made, so the 3 steps I added are gathering materials, places where those are the 3 steps. So I might change that and take that slide out because that's later. Anyway, let's talk about permaculture, and the daddy of permaculture is Bill Mollison, and he started the movement in the 70s in Australia. And a quote from him is, "Though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple." And I could just go into this so deeply, and we're going to talk about this more in the permaculture presentation that got canceled last month because of the rain and the snow and the ice. But this is an important premise to take in with permaculture. And really, if you keep looking at growing things and building gently and being a nurturer of the planet, you'll find that a lot of the problems, when you start bringing it out into the world, even our more complex problems, you can trace it back to really how we treat the soil and how we treat the land. And if we shift that, how it can maybe improve these very complex situations. And so they really aren't that complex. They can be made simple, and not in a way that makes them ineffective. Permaculture is a design technique, and it is based on observing the world, nature, how it operates, how animals and plants and fungi and all that intersect with each other, and how these systems help each other. And it's a beautiful thing to observe, and I know for me, I'm always looking at it and realizing deeper and deeper truths that I can then translate not just into my agricultural life, but into my life in a whole way. And that's why I love it so much. It also has, in watching this, brought me hope. Well, I never did my introduction. So I started getting into permaculture in 2015. I don't know how I ended up on a gentleman named Jeff Lawton's website, and I started watching his videos about greening the desert. And at the time, California was having terrible drought, and I was thinking, oh, maybe that would be the perfect solution. Oh my God, my dog just farted, and I know that my mic just picked it up, so I'm just gonna say that right now. Sorry. Anyway, So I'm recording this at home. Anyway, so I watched Jeff Lawton's videos on greening the desert and how vivacious that became, and how you can even turn desert into greenery that can then sequester carbon and can, create, trees out there, where really desert is not, there's a big problem with desertification, I hope I'm saying that properly, around the world, and especially in places like China, and they've started to realize that, and they're actually sending their army out to go plant trees, which is very inspiring, actually. So they're creating life rather than destroying it, and I think that's beautiful. So anyway, that's permaculture. Waste is a major problem in society, in the world. We're not going to go too deep with this, because you all know this, and that's a whole other conversation, and not really where I go with this meetup. But basically, it takes up space. So that's an output. It's methane gas, which is heating up our atmosphere. That's an output. It wastes nutrient-dense outputs. So we can take this food waste and make it beautiful, compost that's going to feed our soil, feed our next generation of plants, but instead it's just going into a dump somewhere and creating more problems. Because a little bit of, even with this is, so everybody knows the example of cows, having a problem with pooping every, on giant ag, sorry, I'm interrupting myself. So in giant, big ag environments where cows poop and farts are like totally piled into one area, it creates a big problem, because that's not something that's going to break down. There's too much nitrogen, and it puts things out of balance. But when you have cows at pasture, it's not a problem, and in fact it feeds the soil, and it really builds soil in a healthy way. So, and finally, fossil fuels to harvest the waste. So that's our garbage trucks and everything. And I know that just a lot of places are using fossil fuels and all that energy and manpower to harvest all of this extra waste that we could be using in our communities. At this point, I would ask if anybody wants to or can name some more. This is a great way, by the way, while we're on this slide, this is also how I get a feel of whether I should change some slides or whatever. And that's what I like doing about this as well. Okay, so this is a slide from the February presentation I was going to give on the Permaculture Principles. And you can see that next month if you want to, but this month it's going to be just slide number 6, principle number 6, which is produce no waste. Waste not, want not, and a stitch in time saves 9. So the thing that I love about permaculture, well, actually somebody said this during my permaculture design course certification, and they said there is no waste in nature. And at this time I hadn't read David Holmgren's book. This is from David Holmgren, who's also considered one of the fathers of permaculture. And I never actually looked at nature like that before. But now that I am deep into permaculture, I see how connected everything in it is, and how perfect the system of this planet is, and how unfortunate it is that we have made that out of balance. But I feel like there's a self-correcting system in nature, and is resilient, and if we can help along nature and natural systems, really it wants to go back to being in this perfect balance, and all we have to do is help it along a bit. And we do that by observing, and as an element of permaculture as well. But we already know some things. So we know when we observe autumn leaves, in early spring, like I've been walking through the forest with my dog in early spring, can see it breaking down. You can smell how rich that soil is if you just lift up the top layer, and that is composting. And so also, if we see dead animals on the road, it's super sad, but they're feeding the scavengers, and they're also putting out their nutrients back into the soil. And what a beautiful way to make sure that everything is used and everything's broken down, because if every animal remained since the dawn of time, we'd be having a problem. So in design, a lot of the time, the outputs become new inputs for other systems. So like I said, dead animals would then become, maybe, not on a farm, but, like food scraps would be composted down, and then that would be nutrients for your next crop. And gray water is often used from washing dishes, and then it goes into the toilet. Or I know systems that reuse the water 5 times, 6 times before it leaves the area. That's beautiful, So in my mind, not just because we might, there's a part of me that does think, oh my God, we might be facing these shortages of water and food and everything. And that's how do I phrase this? So if you can look at something like, oh, we could conserve water, or, oh my God, we got to conserve water. I like the energy of, yes, we can be efficient and innovative, and that's what gets me jazzed, and the energy of, but it also covers, oh my God, the earth changes, we don't know what that's going to bring. We don't know what the next, where I'm in New Jersey right now, we don't know what the next Sandy is going to do and how that's going to affect us, and we have to put systems in place beforehand in order to make sure that my family, my community, my friends are taken care of, and there's a web there of community and well-being. So, but I like to not go from it at that point. I just get excited about the innovation. So, anyway. So, as I said earlier, composting is everywhere in nature, or else it would all be piled up from the beginning of time. So, and it's not. And that balance is beautiful. And I love thinking about it. I love going like, wow, that is a perfect system. And that one output just flows right into another one. And we could, again, go really deep with that too. But that's a whole conversation. So composting benefits, here's just a few of them. There are many more. We build healthy soil and nutrients, healthy soil structure, and it improves the water retention. It reduces pests in the soil. Hot composting can sterilize weeds, which is great. Have you ever used hay, seed hay, in a compost pile, and then you find that it's growing like crazy? The hot composting will take care of that. It can sequester carbon back into the soil, and reduce methane gases. It's a great way to do waste management, because it's not waste once it's broken down and improve the soil. It's compost, and it's also can be income. So it can be compost, it can be biogas, which we'll talk about later. And so let's keep going. Okay, so we are here. Garbage to black gold. Black gold being compost. So let's talk about the science briefly. We'll start with a quote. Composting is more than just getting rid of food scraps. It's like creating the possibility of life to happen. As I was preparing for this presentation, I was going through my notes from my permaculture design certification, and I had this written, and I unfortunately I don't know if my teacher said it, I don't know if it's a quote from a book, but I like that quote, so I put it in here. It really brings awareness to the fact that it's not just garbage, it's living in a way, and it's creating the possibility for more life. It's feeding more life. It's not just this dead thing, banana peel. No, it's got so much in it, So the requirements for composting, basically, you're going to hear me talk a lot about carbon and nitrogen. You're going to need water, moisture in there. You need oxygen, except for certain kinds of composting, but we're not going to talk about that. And then you're going to need soil, because there's already microbes in the